All right, the UFC returns to China for the first time in years, and the first time since, I believe, 2019. The UFC returns to China, and they're going to Macau, China. It's not Shanghai, Beijing, or Guangdong, so I honestly don't know where that is. I legitimately just don't know Chinese geography. So they're going to Macau, China, excuse me, I don't know where that is, but in the main event, you got Petr taking on Deiveson Figueiredo in the bantamweight division, a huge 5-round main event. In the co-main event, you have got Yang taking on Tabitha Ricci. A lot of Chinese and really just Asian talent are on this card. 13 fights. We've got 3 Road to UFC final fights on this card as well. Again, 13 in total. And folks, if you haven't yet though, make sure to hit the subscribe button down below for some more UFC predictions here on the channel. No UFC next week, but the PFL does return next week for their championship cards. So that will be your dose of MMA next week, whatever. All right, let's move on to our 13 fights. But first, folks, go make sure to check out our college basketball daily bets, our daily best bets, and our NBA predictions that are also daily on the channel, as well as our NFL predictions that are weekly on the channel, as well as our college football predictions that are weekly on the channel as well. All right. To the first of our 13 fights, we start things off here in the lightweight division. We've got Maheshate taking on Nicholas Motta in this one. You've got 2 fighters who are 1-2 competing in this fight. And for Motta, this is a guy who's coming off a win over Tom Nolan. Was it really unexpected? 100%. I don't think anybody expected him to go out there and beat Nolan. It was the first card of 2024. He goes out there and knocks him out in the first round in 1 minute and 3 seconds, cashing as a plus 275 dog in that fight. Prior to that, for Motta, though, he had won a fight over Cameron Van Camp. So he was 2-2 in the UFC, but a win over Cameron Van Camp by knockout in the first. Van Camp, wasn't the best UFC name. Lost to Jim Miller in his first fight. Lost to Manuel Torres. Had the premature stoppage loss to Trey Ogden, and then beat Tom Nolan after that. For Maheshate, this is a guy who is 10-3 professionally, 2-2 in the UFC. Came off the Contender Series with a win over Steve Garcia, which continues to age really well considering where Steve Garcia is at right now in terms of the weight class and his big knockout streak. Losing to Rafa Garcia after that, and then losing to Vyacheslav Borshev after that one. Slaviclaus, obviously, TKO'd Maheshate. And then Maheshate just most recently beat Gabriel Benitez. Are we going to put much into a win over Gabriel Benitez in the big 2024? We're not. I'm just going to be honest with you guys. That's not that impressive of a victory. For Motta, I'm not going to sit here and, try to pretend like his victories are all that impressive either. The Tom Nolan victory, sure, again, it was shocking, yes, but Tom Nolan going into that fight was 6-0 unproven. Yes, he's won back-to-back fights since, but Tom Nolan's beat Victor Martinez and Alex Reyes. Alex Reyes probably shouldn't be in the UFC, and he beat him by decision, and Victor Martinez was never the best UFC name either. So I don't really put much weight into these victories for Tom Nolan. So I don't really know how to judge that Nicholas Motta victory as a whole either. Give me Maheshate to win the fight. We're going to take the Chinese fighter to win the opener here. I like Maheshate striking better than Nicholas Motta. Something else to know about Maheshate, the guy's just going to be turning 25 at the end of the year. He's still 24 years old. Motta's 31. Again, I'm not saying Motta's getting worse at this point of his career, but Maheshate's only getting better. And yes, he's 2-2 in the UFC, but he has shown knockout capability. With the win over Steve Garcia stunning him in their fight in Singapore in 2022. Again, the win over Gabriel Benitez in his last fight was just a striking affair. I think Maheshate picks up the victory in this one. I do think we see primarily just a striking-based fight in this one. Motta is not the best grappler. Maheshate, I don't think he hasn't shot a takedown in his UFC career yet. So you're going to see a striking fight. I think neither guy has successfully landed a takedown in the UFC. Again, I'm going to go with Maheshate to win the fight by first-round knockout to kick off this card. This card will be on late Friday night or early Saturday morning, wherever you are. I guess it's actually midnight on Saturday. So again, very early Saturday morning this card starts. So earlier than most UFC cards, obviously. It's technically, a late Friday night card over in China. We're going with Maheshate to win the fight by first round knockout. I do think he gets it done in this one to kick off the card. Next up, we go on to 2 fighters trying to get their first UFC victory. We've got Xiao taking on Quang Li in this one. 2 guys who are 0-1 so far in the UFC. For Xiao, losing in the finals of the Road to the UFC finals. I believe that was earlier this year. And for Quang Li, this is a guy who's 8-1 professionally, but lost his UFC debut on short notice to Chris Gutierrez, who's originally booked to fight on the Contender Series, but they needed an opponent for Gutierrez in August of this year, and he took the fight and obviously lost it by decision. Quang Li didn't fight horribly. I mean, I think, he lost 2 out of 3 rounds in that fight. winning the second round because of his wrestling, but Gutierrez was obviously the better striker in that one, winning the first and third rounds because of it. You look at what Long Xiao has done in the UFC, it's just a loss to Chang Ho Lee, again, in the road to the UFC finale fight on that Whitaker-Aliskerov card in Saudi Arabia earlier this year. Before that, again, winning back-to-back fights on the road to the UFC. I don't know. This is just a really weird fight to pick up, to be honest with you guys. Again, two guys who are very unproven. Kwang Lee is 33 years of age getting into this fight. For Long Xiao, he's 26, but Long Xiao he's 26-9, and he's 26 years of age. That's insane. Again, yes, he's got that experience, but at the same time, Long Xiao has also lost 9 fights out of, 37? I know it's not a horrible record, but you're just that young, you're fighting in the regionals that much, and you've lost that many times. That's a little bit concerning. For Kwang Lee, again, he is the much older fighter at 33, but he's only lost once to Chris Gutierrez. This is a guy who's fought in LFA before, was winning fights in LFA, was knocking guys out in LFA. And honestly, I like the striking game better out of Kwang Lee. Long Xiao has been knocked out 3 times in his career, and he's only 26 years of age. He was TKO'd back in 2017. He got knocked out, I think he got knocked out again in 2017. I don't know. His record's kind of odd because it doesn't completely fill out. And also, Long Xiao has definitely not fought anywhere near the competition of Kwang Lee. I mean, this is a guy in Long Xiao who lost on the contender series to Christian Quinones, came back to WLF Wars, won back-to-back fights against 2-3 and 9-6 fighters, and then barely got by on the road to the UFC. Did not look impressive in any of his fights. Again, barely won fights by split decision and majority decision. And now here he is in the UFC against Kwang Lee. I think Kwang Lee is the better fighter. Nothing against what the UFC's got going with the road to the UFC. I don't think the guys they're getting from that are that great. I'm gonna be honest with you guys. I think again, some of their prospects aren't bad from that show, but I don't know, especially the losers of the road to the UFC, tournament. For Long Xiao, he won 2 fights barely against not great opponents, and then he lost in the finals, and then he's getting another fight in the UFC. And the only reason he's still fighting, obviously, in the promotion is because they get to fight him in China. Again, the Chinese fighters, we have them as 1-0 so far, obviously, with the Maheshate victory. Kwang Lee is a Vietnamese fighter, but he trains in Minnesota. Again, Long Xiao is a Chinese fighter who still trains in China. We're going to go with the Minnesotan Vietnamese fighter in Kwang Lee to win the fight. Again, Long Xiao has been finished on the feet before. I think it'll happen again. Kwang Lee, again, outside the UFC, back-to-back victories to punch his ticket into the promotion. Again, a Cody Peterson first-round knockout in 65 seconds, then a Tiao Thang victory in about 2 minutes in LFA in a co-main event spot in 2024. Kwang Lee has shown the early power in fights. For being a bantamweight, he hits very hard. Again, I know the only success he saw against Chris Gutierrez was grappling, but that was a short notice fight he took against a borderline top 15/top 20 guy in Chris Gutierrez. I like Kwang Lee to win this fight. He's not more experienced, but he's older, and I think he's fought better guys. So give me Kwang Lee to win the fight by first round knockout. Long Xiao is incredibly hittable, and he really has not fought anybody that great. I'm not saying Kwang Lee's, again, a premier prospect. He's 33, but I just do think he's the better fighter. Give me Kwang Lee to win the fight here to send the Chinese fighters now to 1-1. Next up, we go to the flyweight division. We've got Lonnie Kavanagh taking on Jose Ochoa in this fight. You got 2 very young fighters in this one. Lonnie Kavanagh making his UFC debut at 25 years old, and for Ochoa, he is 23, making his UFC debut as well. Both these guys are 7-0 professionally. Lonnie Kavanagh is coming off of a victory on the Contender Series, punching his ticket into the UFC, and for Ochoa, this is a guy who last fought in 2023 against Juscelino Pantoja and winning that fight by anaconda choke in LFA in the first round. Ochoa, again, that was his first submission victory. Prior to that, every single fight that he had won, every single fight that he had ended in knockout. I just think it's an incredibly tough fight for Jose Ochoa in this one. This is a Peruvian fighter, again, 23 years of age, won his last fight about a year ago, and now you're running into Lonnie Kavanagh, who, again, is unproven, sure, but he's 7-0. This is a guy who fought in Cage Warriors prior to getting his shot on the Contender Series, and then he went out there and knocked out Antoine Ho in 2 minutes on the Contender, and now here he is against Jose Ochoa. I'm going to consider Lonnie Kavanagh a Chinese fighter just because, again, he does train in Kavanagh, my goodness, does train in China, does Kavanagh, that's what I was getting to. I believe he lives in China. I think he lives in China, trains in England. So yeah, Lonnie Kavanagh, a Chinese fighter, 5'4", again, he is short for the weight class, that is fine, but, that is fair, but Lonnie Kavanagh hits really hard for being a 125-pounder, and Jose Ochoa does too, but Jose Ochoa hasn't beaten anybody by knockout, who's all that great. It's been a bunch of regional guys. He's only had 1 fight in LFA, and that was that Juscelino Pantoja fight where he wins it by anaconda choke in the first round. Again, good victory, don't get me wrong. But still, that's the only really proven fight he has had. He was supposed to fight Jack Duffy on the Contender Series. Ochoa withdrew from the fight, and instead of, again, having to work his way back into the UFC, he immediately gets a shot here against Lonnie Kavanagh. For me personally, this feels like another one of these fights where they're trying to give the Chinese fighter a victory. Again, Kavanagh at home, I feel like he should be in a great position to win this one. And again, the UFC, I feel like they like Kavanagh. They signed him on the Contender Series. He is a guy that they can market. I think he's one of the better guys they got at the Contender, just considering where he does place in his current weight class. I think he does have a chance to kind of make some noise in the flyweight division. He's a guy who hits very hard for the weight class, as you saw in his Contender Series victories, something that is, kind of missing for some of these guys at 125. He is a very built 125 pounder. Again, he's not a guy who could, I don't think if he fought at 135, he, could do it. I just think he doesn't because of his height, obviously. I mean, he's a guy who definitely has to cut down to 125, barely made the weight in his last fight on the Contender Series. He is a physically strong 125-pounder, and I think he's going to give a lot of guys problems, especially, these lower flyweights. Guys like Victor Altamirano, Carlos Hernandez, guys like that, Edgar Chairez. I think Lonnie Kavanagh would give a lot of these guys trouble. I'm going to take him to win his UFC debut over Jose Ochoa. Again, Ochoa I just feel like he's very unproven. He's still very young, even younger than Kavanagh, who's 25 years of age. I think you see a striking fight. I think Kavanagh's better. That's just the way I see it. I think these guys, again, they're going to mix it up on the feet, but I just think Lonnie Kavanagh's a better striker. Give me Lonnie Kavanagh to win this fight in his UFC debut against Jose Ochoa, who's making his UFC debut. Give me Kavanagh to win the fight by first round knockout. As we move on to our next one, we go on to the road to the UFC finals, and we start off first here with Su Young Yu taking on Bulgan Jenisuly in this fight. For Su Young Yu, the Korean fighter, he won his first fight in the road to the UFC over Shohei Nos, and then beat Darmasi Zawupasi by split decision in his last fight, obviously now putting him into the road to the UFC final. And for his opponent here, you've got a fighter coming in from Shanghai, China. It is Bulgan Jenisuly, and by the way, the Chinese fighters, are 2-1 on this card, at least the way we have them predicted so far. But for Yu's opponent, he is taking on Berejang Jenisuly, who came off of a fight, got an opportunity last year on the road to the UFC, lost in the first round of his tournament to Shuya Kamikubo by split decision, then beat Li Yunfeng in his last fight, or 2 fights ago, by rear naked choke, and then beating Tokita Nakanishi by unanimous decision in his last one. Okay. What we have seen out of Jenisuly so far in the road to the UFC, we've seen some really good wrestling. He's able to stuff a lot of takedowns, and he's able to, again, be the aggressor and get the fight on the mat and look for submissions. For Su Young Yu, this is a guy who, does kind of do the same thing. I would say his striking's better, but he's a very good wrestler as well who can grapple. I feel like this is somewhat of a mirror match here. I'm not going to lie. I mean, both these guys kind of do the same exact thing. The experience obviously goes to Jenisuly, who's 19-5, who has had many more fights than Su Young Yu. You look at where these guys fought before making their way into the road to the UFC. Well, Su Young Yu had a no contest that ended by accidental groin kick prior to fighting into the road to the UFC, and then lost the fight before that to Dastan Amangeldi for the Natsia FC. Maybe I'm mispronouncing that. The NFC Bantamweight Championship. And for Bulgan Jenisuly, this is a guy, again, who got the shot on the road to the UFC last season, and then won back-to-back fights on UAE Wars and Alash Pride, albeit against an 8-14 fighter in his last fight. But then again, won back-to-back fights by naked choke and by unanimous decision. Look at the odds for this one. Again, you get the slight favorite is Su Young Yu. Jenisuly, again, is coming in as a plus 105 dog. I'm actually going to go with the underdog to win this fight. We're going to take the Chinese fighter in Bulgan Jenisuly to win the fight by unanimous decision. Again, where I do think Su Young Yu has an advantage, I think will probably be in the striking game, and maybe with his wrestling, but the jiu-jitsu, I don't even think so. I think, you look at what Bulgan's able to do. I think his defensive wrestling is good enough. I think on the ground, Jenisuly has the advantage. On the feet, sure, I will give it to Su Young Yu. Both of these guys, 28 years of age. They're both within 3 weeks of each other in age. I do think Bulgan does win the fight by unanimous decision. I think he is going to be able to get takedowns in this fight. On the feet, yeah, I do think, Su Yu-Jitsu Young Yu is probably better. That's his nickname, Yu-Jitsu. But I think Bulgan does win this fight on the ground. I think that's where he does take this fight. He's a more experienced guy, obviously. I do like that. And for Su Young Yu, sure, again, he's been competitive. He's been good and impressive in the road to the UFC, but a loss, again, 2 fights ago in December of 2023. I get it. He was the deep, that's a promotion in China, or not China, in Asia. I think it's Japanese, if I'm not mistaken. Is it Japanese? Yeah, it's a Japanese promotion called Deep. He was the Deep champion but then lost his next fight again in Natsia FC. I think Boglin wins the fight. Again, these are some of these fights, personally, I'll probably be betting on every one of these fights because, there's going to be nothing else on at this time. So I'll probably just, be sitting in my room at, 2 in the morning watching, road to UFC fights. So personally, I'm probably going to be laying some on Boglin. Again, I don't mind the plus money in this fight. I think these guys are evenly matched. And if we get 2 guys who are evenly matched, we're going to try to take the underdog here. And the underdog, again, who is fighting at home. I don't know if there is going to be a bias towards Chinese fighters in this card, but it is something that you always have to keep in mind too, especially a fight like this that we do think is going to go to the scorecards. I think the Chinese fighters go to 3-1. Give me Boglin Jenisuly to win the fight by unanimous decision, winning one for China. Next up, we go back to the road to the UFC here. We go now to the flyweight division. We have got Sahota from England and from Manchester top team taking on Dong Hoon Choi. This is probably the one, actually no, the next road to the UFC fight feels like it's pretty one-sided, but we'll get to that one later. For Sahota, this guy is 12-2, back-to-back victories on the road to the UFC. And the thing about the road to the UFC is, you don't get a lot of finishes. And now I get it, it's, lighter weight guys, but that's why personally I don't watch the road to the UFC when it's live. It's because a lot of these fights don't end by stoppage, and they're all decisions. Because again, they're lighter weight guys, and they're more technical guys, obviously, who are gonna, engage in scrambles, or they're gonna look to wrestle and don't hit as hard. But I'm just saying, that's just kind of how road to UFC fights goes sometimes. Anyways, for Dong Hoon Choi, this is a guy who won back-to-back split decision victories on the road to the UFC. A very young fighter. I believe he was born in 1999. That makes him 25 years of age. Actually, it's not that young, considering, just we have 19-year-olds in the UFC born, obviously, past the year 2000, like me. But, no, not in the UFC, obviously. But regardless, for Dong Hoon Choi, back-to-back victories, winning one by split decision against Jenisuly and Angad Bichette, winning that one by split decision. Did score a knockdown in that second fight. Ended up again getting the split decision nod. For Sahota, won his first fight in the road to the UFC by split decision against Yin Shuai. He got really out-grappled in that fight, but Sahota was able to win moments in the feet. He got dominated on the ground in that fight, but again, won the striking exchanges and ended up winning the fight. And then beating Ruel Penales in his last fight by unanimous decision. That was a pretty one-sided fight in favor of Sahota. Was able to keep the fight standing. Did, have moments on the ground too, but he was the better striker in that fight, and he ended up winning it again by unanimous decision. Prior to the UFC, again, Dong Hoon Choi is undefeated. He's 8-0. The Korean was winning in Gladiator Challenge prior to fighting into the UFC. Not the American Gladiator Challenge, but the Gladiator Challenge in Japan. And for Sahota, he did lose on Cage Warriors 2 fights prior to making the UFC road to the UFC run, losing to Sean Marcos da Silva by second round TKO. This is a guy who is 12-2 professionally. I get it. Both these guys, in all fairness, have been very unimpressive so far in the in the road to the UFC. I do think Dong Hoon Choi has been the more impressive guy, personally. He has more power on the feet. He looks like the better striker. Even though, again, Sahota did have a good striking performance in his last one. I don't think you see much wrestling in this one, even though I think, again, Sahota does have I think Sahota has a little bit of a weakness on the ground, even though, again, I haven't really seen Dong Hoon Choi really grapple all that much either. In all fairness, he was able to pop back up to his feet and defend takedowns against Angad Bichette in his last one. I do think Dong Hoon Choi does win the fight. I'm going to take him by decision here. It's the flyweight division. I don't really expect to finish in this one, especially because both these guys have had 4 fights combined in the road to the UFC, and none of them have ended by finish. I don't really think this one's going to be the first. It's going to be the South Korean fighter. I'm going to take Dong Hoon Choi to win the fight by unanimous decision here over Sahota. So no Chinese fighter in that one. And now we go to a fight where it's China versus China. It is going to be the doctor, Ming taking on Yanzhan Feng in this fight. For Ming she is the underdog in this one. She is plus 245. She is 30 years of age. She is 16-5 professionally, and she'll be taking on Yanzhan Feng, who is just 22 years of age and is a heavy favorite in this fight, which I get it. She has looked good so far on the road to the UFC, again, back-to-back victories, and obviously both these fighters have picked up back-to-back wins. For Meng Shi, 2 straight wins, one by unanimous decision, one by split decision over Hu Shang Dong in her last one by split decision. Yeah, I think Yanzhan Feng does win the fight. Shi Ming does have decent power for being a strawweight. She does, did get a knockdown in her first fight against Yidam Xiao. Ended up winning that fight by unanimous decision. Got out-grappled in the Dong Hushang fight. but ended up winning the fight by split decision, was able to do enough damage on the feet in that fight. And then for Yang Feng, this is a fighter who won her first fight against Kiran Singh, picked up a knockout in the first round, TKO win in the first round, which is something that doesn't really happen on the road to the UFC. Ended up winning that fight, got the fight on the ground, just unloaded on ground and pound, ended up winning the fight on the ground, and then beat Miko Montano in her last fight by split decision, by unanimous decision, excuse me. Defended takedowns. Montano went 3 for 10 on takedowns in that fight, and it was really just Yang Feng dominating the fight on the feet. I think everything here kind of just shouts to a Yang Feng victory out of Guangdong. Oh, Guangdong's a province? Oh, I didn't know that. I just know that because of the Guangdong Tigers. That's how I knew that at the beginning of the video, that Guangdong's a place in China, just because I may have bet on the Guangdong Tigers in the past. Guangdong Tigers versus Shanghai Sharks. I mean, it's just a classic battle. But anyways, Feng is from Guangzhou, Guangdong, China. She is 22 years of age, 10-2. She's just looked way more impressive prior to, or in the road to the UFC. You look prior to the road to the UFC. Regional WLF wars fights from women's fighters in China. I'm sorry, guys. It doesn't move me at all. Ming Shi's last fight before going into the road to the UFC was in Kunming International Kung Fu Cultural Fight Festival. She was the only MMA fight on the card. It was a Kung Fu kickboxing event. What's going on? Diving into Chinese regional fights is really interesting, I'm not gonna lie. Like, quick side note, I know this isn't Chinese regionals, but some of these countries, like China, like, again, China's got WLF wars, but outside of, like, Road FC and WLF wars, and I know Road FC is I think it's Korean, if I'm not mistaken. I think it's Korean. Yeah, it's Korean. I remember Mansoor Barnaby would fight in that. Regardless, diving deeper into some of these regionals is really interesting. Quick shout out, not a shout out, but I remember when I was researching about, Zalzia Felzinikova, I believe her name was, in PFL a couple years ago, and she was fighting in Kazakhstani regional MMA. Like, just researching some of these cards are really weird. Like, stuff like that. You see Ming Shi fighting in a Kung Fu event against a fighter who's never fought professional mixed martial arts before. An 0-0 fighter. This is, again, the last fight prior to the UFC. She took 2 years off in between this, by the way. She wins a fight against a fighter who hasn't never fought before on Kunming International Kung Fu Cultural Festival 5. And she wins by rear naked choke in 52 seconds. She's the only MMA fight on that card. I don't understand some of these fights. I don't. For Yang Feng, you see the record 10-2. Well, a lot of her losses come in 2020 and 2021. She was like 19 years old back then. And that was in WLF wars against fighters who were 17-4. Liang Na, former UFC name, who wasn't the best in the UFC, but still back then beat her. And then Ji Mao, who was 10-4 at the time, now 12-4. I don't think those are bad losses. I really don't think they are. And again, for Ming Shi, she's just lost, 4 fights ago, lost to a 1-1 Hailey Wusamao. Yeah, I'm taking Yang Feng to win the fight. She looks way more impressive. It's a women's fight, it's probably no finish, but give me Yang Feng to win the fight and to earn the contract in the road to the UFC by unanimous decision. Okay, we move on to, back to non-road to UFC fights. We get Carlos Hernandez taking on, I believe, the Mongolian, if I'm not mistaken here. And hold on, I gotta completely try to pronounce his name. He was scheduled for a UFC fight, I believe, earlier this year. Or was it last year? He was scheduled to fight in the UFC against Andre Lima. It was earlier this year at UFC 302. All right, let's try to pronounce his name. He is Mongolian, I do believe. Yes, from Mongolia. It is Tumendemberel. Tumendemberel? I believe his name is? I could be wrong. But he's 26 years of age, won on the road to the UFC last year, and now here he is against Carlos Hernandez. I don't know what to make out of this fight. I'm going to be completely honest with you guys. I was talking about, I'm going to bet on a lot of these fights. Don't bet on this fight. There's no value either way. Hear me out. Carlos Hernandez should not be a -190 favorite against anybody in the UFC. I think this guy really should be 1-4 in the UFC. I've spoken at length before about how I thought Victor Altamirano beat him in his UFC debut. Not just because I bet on that fight, but actually, no, I don't think I did. Actually, that was before I became a DJ gambler. Regardless, just because I picked Victor Altamirano to win that fight. I thought Altamirano, though, did beat Carlos Hernandez. Hernandez then lost to Alan Nascimento, beat Denis Bondar, don't care. Lost to Tetsuro Taira, lost to Ray Tsura. Given he's fighting good guys, but still, I don't know what to make out of Carlos Hernandez because he has lost to good guys. But then you look at Nima Jargwal, Tumendemberel, And who has he beat? He's undefeated, won back-to-back fights on the road to the UFC, which, again, I don't think is the greatest. And then, before that, beat a 15-10-2 Masayaki Watanabe. And then beat an 0-0, 2-1, 2-2 guy. I don't know what to make out of this fight. Guys, he comes from Mongolian regional MMA. Aren't there like 670,000 people in that country? By the way, love Mongolian barbecue. I mean, Mongolian barbecue is something else. I had a Mongolian barbecue spot right next to my place, and they just shut down after like 5 years of business. It was great. It was awesome. Mongolian barbecue's the best. Okay, they've got 3 million people in Mongolia. For comparison, their biggest city is Ulaanbaatar, and Ulaanbaatar's got 1.7 million people. So other than that, like, it's just, there's not that many people in the state of Mongolia, or the country of Mongolia. And by the way, the country of Mongolia is massive. I mean, it is huge. And Mongolian history is fascinating to me, by the way. It is. But Mongolia is absolutely massive, and there's like nobody there. But they gave us Mongolian barbecue, so Mongolia is great. My Mongolian food, I need to have Mongolian barbecue. I haven't had that in months. Anyways, you don't want to hear about me. I'm getting sidetracked. Regardless, I don't know what to make out of this fight. Again, Tumendemberel is fighting in regional Mongolian fights, wins in the road to the UFC over Top Nuai Kiram, where he wins the fight by split decision, gets out wrestled, but wins the fight on the feet. And then he submits Petr Deiveson in his next one by first round submission. But I don't know how good these guys are. Petr Deiveson is a fighter who's born in Denmark, now trains in Thailand, who is very unproven. He's 6-2. And then Top Nuai Kiram is 9-6 from Thailand. I'm confused. I'm so confused who to pick in this fight. Carlos Hernandez, again, has not looked horrible in the UFC. Well, no, he kind of has, but the guys he's fought, I've just outclassed him, but a lot of these guys are just better than him. I don't know. This is a confusing fight. I've never ever on the channel just wanted to say, no pick. I kind of want to say that here. I'll give a pick. I would not bet on this fight. Give me the Mongolian. Give me Namijorgral Tumendemberel. Give me the Mongolian. Give me the Mongolian to win the fight. I think he can get it done by decision. Carlos Hernandez, again, has just kind of gotten flatlined in his UFC career, given against good fighters, but hopefully this trend continues. You do get decent plus money here on the Mongolian, but just do yourself a favor and don't bet on this fight. I've got an idea. Instead of spending 20 bucks, I'm not joking, this would be a great idea. I'm going to do this week. Instead of betting $20 on this fight, go to an all-you-can-eat Mongolian barbecue spot for $20. It's great. It's just you get noodles, you get beef, you get lamb. It's fire. I need to get Mongolian barbecue tonight. Man. All right, we're taking the Mongolian to win the fight. I'm gonna take him by decision. I don't know. This fight's so weird. Next up, we go into a really good fight that just starts off the main card randomly. Volkan Oezdemir versus Carlos Ulberg. This is a cracking fight at 205 pounds in the light heavyweight division. We'll see how Volkan Oezdemir approaches this fight. We will see, because I don't think it goes without saying Carlos Ulberg probably has him beat on the feet. Does Oezdemir look to wrestle? He hasn't been the best wrestler in his UFC run. He did that in the Bogdan Guskov fight. And again, Guskov was making his UFC debut in that fight. Really well-credentialed striker. Obviously, now you see Guskov in the top 15 of the weight class after his win over Ryan Spann. Well, Volkan Oezdemir said in Bogdan's debut, all right, you're a well-accomplished kickboxer. I don't care. I'm just going to take you down and submit you. That's what he did. Really tried that against Carlos Ulberg. I think he's going to have to. Carlos Ulberg has been really good with his, obviously a CKB guy who's transitioned to MMA, obviously from kickboxing, has really worked his grappling very well, and he's become a better grappler. Is he better, though, than a guy who's been training mixed martial arts his entire life in Volkan Oezdemir? Probably not. So I think there is the advantage for Volkan Oezdemir in this one, because on the feet, simply put, I just think he's outmatched. Again, Volkan has been able to get into some really good back and forth wins, striking-wise in the UFC, at least recently, too. Like, Johnny Walker was a great victory for Volkan, flatlined him earlier this year. The way Volkan was just able to kind of just beat up Paul Craig to a pulp on the feet. I get it. Bo Nickel outstruck Paul Craig for 15 minutes on the feet, but still, Oezdemir is able to do the same thing. The pathway to the victory for Volkan Oezdemir has got to be through the wrestling, I would have to think. I don't think he can out-kickbox Karl Ulberg. I like Volkan. I picked him when everyone was picking Paul Craig in their fight in 2022, when Paul Craig was a favorite over Volkan Oezdemir. We picked Volkan Oezdemir. I kind of can't trust him to beat Karl Ulberg in this fight. Again, just because Ulberg's wrestling and his grappling is much improved. It's been worked on really well, and I just don't think it's going to be like a walk in the park for Oezdemir if he tries to take Ulberg down. We've thought that before in some Ulberg fights too, like, oh, if this guy can just get him down, then we think, they're in a great spot. The one that I remember is the Nikolai fight from, what was it? Was that Madison Square Garden in 2022? We thought, okay, Nikolai was going to be able to take Ulberg down. He's going to be able to beat him. No. We picked Ulberg pretty much every single fight that he's had in the UFC, other than that Nikolai fight, other than his only loss in the UFC to Kennedy Nzechukwu. I'm going to keep, saying that I picked that one right. Kennedy Nzechukwu was a plus 300 dog in that fight, and we picked Kennedy Nzechukwu to knock him out. I'm just saying. Regardless, Ulberg is coming off that quick 12-second knockout victory over Alonzo Menefield. Alonzo Menefield, didn't fight the smartest fight in that one. I don't know why you just charge into Karl Ulberg. I don't get it. I think Ulberg's able to keep the fight standing. I think he is. I don't even know if Oezdemir tries a takedown. If he does, I do think it will get stuffed because Ulberg does have, a reach and does have, length on Oezdemir. And on top of that, again, I don't mind Ulberg's defensive wrestling, which ultimately I think just makes it a really difficult fight for Volkan Oezdemir. I just think it does. I think it just makes it a really difficult fight for him. I think Ulberg, again, will maintain distance. I think Ulberg will keep his striking well, and I think he will knock out Volkan Oezdemir in the first round. I like Volkan, I do. And Volkan, I don't think he's only been knocked out twice. You go back to the Yuri Prochazka loss, and then prior to that was the DC TKO loss. I'm not saying it's going to be like the Prochazka fight, where, again, Prochazka was just kind of just stalking and waiting for Oezdemir the entire fight, and just kind of circling and just waiting for Oezdemir to make a wrong step, and then boom, Prochazka finished him. I just think Ulberg's going to be able to go out there and find a finish pretty quickly. This guy's got really good power, man. I'm going to be interested to see where Ulberg goes next, because this is the fight that you kind of need Ulberg in to kind of, prop him up in the weight class, obviously, right? He needs a true, big-time win in the light heavyweight division. You give him this victory over Oezdemir, be ranked number 8. Guys, don't be surprised, I'm not joking, if they try to do Ulberg and Pereira next. Don't be surprised. After Pereira fights Ankalaev, don't be surprised if his next fight's Karl Ulberg. If Pereira beats, actually, regardless if Pereira beats Ankalaev, no, he'd get a rematch. If he beats Ankalaev, don't be surprised if his next title defense is Karl Ulberg. They'd book Ulberg again, obviously. They do Ulberg and Jan Blachowicz probably has to be the next fight. No, Jan would probably beat Ulberg, though. I don't know. Jan's 41. Well, I guess the next fight. I think if Ulberg wins, the next fight's him and Jan Blachowicz. I don't know what we're going to see out of Nikita Krylov. Obviously, his fight against Azamat Murzakanov was supposed to be last week. Murzakanov pulled out, so maybe we see Krylov back in the swing of things soon. I would like to see Krylov against, like, a Jamal Hill, personally. But I think they're probably going to do Jamal Hill and Yuri Prochazka. So, give me Krylov and Rakic. I wouldn't mind that. Khalil Roundtree, I don't know who he fights, honestly. No, Khalil's going to need a lot of time, let's just be honest. So we can do Ulberg and Blachowicz. And if you want to get Khalil back in there, hear me out. Give Khalil Dominic Reyes if he wins against Anthony Smith. You're trying to push Khalil, so that's a very winnable fight for Khalil. Just saying. That's how I do the light heavyweight division. I don't know. That's a lot of moving pieces, but I like to see Ulberg take that next step and get a guy like Jan Blachowicz next in a title eliminator. Right? Again, I know Jan's been out for a while, but he has that split decision loss to Pereira. He had the draw against Ankalaev. I wouldn't mind seeing Blachowicz get one more crack at the belt if he's able to be an up-and-coming guy like Karl Ulberg. And I know Ulberg's 34 years old, but he's a guy who's up and coming into the top 15, obviously. So give me Ulberg to beat Oezdemir, and we'll see what next step the UFC makes for him. But don't be surprised if he's fighting in a title fight very soon, just because of his kickboxing, because of his background, and because the stylistic matchup he does offer Alex Pereira. I'm just saying, Pereira would whoop him, don't get me wrong, but it's one of those fights that I actually think would be pretty interesting. And also you have the narrative, all right, Ulberg's a CKB guy. Izzy couldn't do it. Can Ulberg do it against Pereira? I'm just saying it's a fight that might happen. All right, let's move on to the women's flyweight division. Kong Wang takes on Gabriela Fernandes. This is the biggest lock of the night, and now it's a minus 505 favorite, give or take 500, 550, thank you, favorite in Kong Wang. I don't know what the Kong Wang knockout odds are, but if you can find it actually just don't take it. Because at the end of the day, it's a women's fight and anything can happen. Kong Wang should absolutely beat the crap out of Gabriela Fernandes. Gabriela Fernandes is an MMA Masters fighter. She's coming off a winner last fight over Carly Judas, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, she beat Carly Judas in her last one. Judas, and Fernandes had a good fight. I'll give him that. It was a great fight, back and forth war. The problem for Gabriela Fernandes is that she won the fight, so good for her. Obviously, that's the reason she's still in the UFC. But if she has that fight against Kong Wang, she's getting knocked out in the first round. The UFC is putting the promotional backing on Kong Wang. They should. She's a fun up-and-coming Chinese fighter, right? Who can knock fighters out at 125 pounds. And she does the whole Joker thing as well in the weigh-ins. I'm sure you'll see that in the ceremonial weigh-ins before this fight against Gabriela Fernandes. She's a marketable fighter. She is what the UFC kind of wished Marcus Perez was, the whole Joker thing. I'm serious. So if Kong Wang keeps putting together victories, you'll see her in the top 15 pretty quickly. Flyweight's not a bad weight class at all for the UFC. It really isn't. It's probably, is it the deepest one? It's gotta be the deepest one. I think, 115, 125. I don't know. They're close. 135 is absolutely horrible. It's absolutely crap. Guys, Chelsea Chandler is ranked still at women's 135. Miesha Tate's ranked 11th. Yana Santos is 10. Declan Cavalcanti, actually, I'll give Cavalcanti that, 14. Julia Avila's 12. I mean, what are we doing? Regardless, Kayla Harrison versus Juliana Pena has got to be next, obviously, right? And guys, if Juliana Pena beats beats Kayla Harrison, we're gonna have to start having uncomfortable conversations about how Juliana Pena is in the greatest of all time talk in women's MMA. I'm not joking. I'm not saying she is. We're gonna have to start having the conversation. If she's not beating Kayla Harrison, by the way, but if she does, we're gonna have to start having some uncomfortable conversations. She's beat Amanda Nunes. She beats Kayla Harrison, and then say she gets Nunes again and beats Nunes? And this is very far-fetched. And the odds of this happening, guys, I have a better chance of pulling Madison Beer than this happening. But, which, hey, regardless. But if it does, if Pena beats Harrison and beats Nunes in a third fight, I think she is the greatest women's fighter ever, right? At 14-7, but still, I'm just saying, it's not happening. She's gonna lose to Kayla Harrison. Regardless, I don't know why I started talking about Juliana Pena, but Kong Wang's gonna beat the crap out of Gabriela Fernandes. Look at Kong Wang's first fight in the UFC. It's a dominant knockout victory over Victoria Leonardo. Now, are we pumping up Kong Wang just a little bit because of that win? Sure, she did just beat Victoria Leonardo. I completely understand that, but still, it was that dominant, and you just don't see that power often at this weight class. And Kong Wang is, pretty big for 125. She's 5'6", 5'7", I do believe. Kickboxing background. I do think when you see her fight a better grappler, she's going to have problems, and that's where this fight does come into play. Because Gabriela Fernandes is Brazilian, and just because she's Brazilian, she's good at jiu-jitsu. No, but she's an MMA fighter, MMA Masters fighter. They are known for their jiu-jitsu with, it's Daniel Valverde, I believe, is the jiu-jitsu coach there. Is it Cesar Carneiro? It's one of the two. I think it's Valverde is the jiu-jitsu coach. These are Colby Covington's coaches, obviously, too. Shout out to Colby taking the Buckley fight later this month, or next month. That's a big-time fight. Big-time fight I did not expect Colby Covington to take. So, good for Colby. It's his last run of the belt if he can beat Buckley. He still needs 2 fights, but, if he can beat Buckley, I'm really happy for Colby. I think he beats Buckley, by the way. I hope. I don't know. Regardless, Buckley lost to Chris Curtis a year ago. I don't know. Gabriela Fernandes will test Kong Wang's jiu-jitsu. I just don't think she'll test it enough. I do think Kong Wang, again, I want to see her against a decent grappler in the top 15. Give me her and... not Casey O'Neill. Actually, I wouldn't mind that. Kong Wang probably wins, but maybe Casey O'Neill, maybe the Skazi, messes it up, mixes it up with the grappling a little bit. Or maybe give me her and Jasmine Jasdavidius. If you really want it, we can do Kong Wang and Jasmine next, or Casey O'Neill, regardless. I like either of those fights. Or actually, if you really want to push her, give her Jessica Andrade, and let's just see what happens. Or give her Caitlin Kuchagian, and let's see what happens there, right? Why not? The UFC, again, they are pushing Kong Wang, obviously. She's on the main card of this fight night. It's just, she's fighting Gabriela Fernandes, who's 1-2, but she's still on the main card. So we're going to take the Chinese fighter. Give me Kong Wang to win the fight by first round knockout. I don't think Fernandes is able to test her too much with the grappling. I think Kong Wang kind of, shucks off a takedown and just, wins the fight by knockout in the first. So that will send the Chinese fighters to, I got to do my math one more time here. We had Maheshate, we had the loss for Xiao, we had Lonnie Kavanagh, we had Jenisuly, so it's 3-1. Two Chinese fighters in that fight. So we got the Chinese fighters now at 4-1 in this fight, or with this win for Kong Wang. I do think she beats the Brazilian Gabriela Fernandes, and she gets it done in the first round. We move on to our next one. We go on to the welterweight division. We've got Song Kenan taking on Muslim Salikhov. It feels like Muslim Salikhov just fought, and he doesn't fight this, he doesn't fight, with that short of turnaround this often, but here he is at 40 years of age. We get an active Muslim Salikhov, and he's taking on Song Kenan. He's coming off a victory just in August on the Duplessis Adesanya card, where he went out there and beat Rick Glenn by unanimous decision for Muslim Salikhov. Again, 40 years of age, but is coming off a victory over Santiago Ponzinibbio in a fight that he lost. I thought he lost to Ponzinibbio, but they gave him the decision. Is what it is. I'm not going to say it's a robbery. I just thought Ponzinibbio won the fight. But Salikhov got it by split decision. Now you get him and Song Kenan. Kenan is the favorite going into, he's the underdog. He's plus 140. Really? Wow. Wow. I'm surprised. I'm really surprised, actually. I was going to take Song Kenan regardless. Now I feel even better about this pick. Actually, he lost to Kevin Joustin. Oh. Maybe I shouldn't take Song Kenan in this fight. Now looking at this, but Salikhov's 40, didn't really beat the Ponzinibbio fight when the Ponzinibbio fight looked kind of slow in that one. Yeah, I'm going to take the guy who's not 40 years old. Give me the Chinese fighters. Song Kenan to win the fight. Send the Chinese fighters to 5-1 on this card. I don't know where I got 4-0 from. Here's why. Okay, Salikhov's 40 years old. He beat Santiago Ponzinibbio. Looked slow in that fight. Got knocked out early in the Randy Brown fight earlier this year in 2024. This is Salikhov's third fight of the year. Wow. Lost in 2023 to Nicholas Dalby in a fight where they were just kind of striking for parts. And Dalby, was doing okay in the striking. Yeah, Salikhov was winning, and where Dalby won the fight, obviously, was with his grappling in the second and the third round. But, Salikhov's not in his prime, obviously, anymore. The nickname, the King of Kung Fu, that's great. But again, Salikhov's not in his athletic and physical prime no more. Song Kenan's 34. I do think he should be able to win this fight. He's at home in China. Now, Song Kenan does get chinned a lot. Let's just be honest with ourselves. He gets chinned all the damn time. He got chinned by Ian Gary, he got chinned by Max Griffin. Outside the UFC, he got chinned by Brad Riddell. Guys are able to chin this dude. That's fair. Salikhov hasn't chinned anybody since the Fiallo fight, and before that, you got to go way back to the Nordine Taleb win at UFC 242 in a fight card that was main evented by Khabib and Dustin Poirier. I don't really think Salikhov's got much power anymore at 40 years of age. I don't think Salikov's all that technical anymore at 40 years of age. So I think Song Kenan wins the fight. I think so. Do I feel great about it? No. But I don't mind the underdog pick here. Again, he's 6 years younger than Muslim Salikhov, who's going to turn 41 early next year. I think he's quicker on the feet. Yes, Song Kenan does leave his chin up to be exposed, but he doesn't have bad power in his own right. Again, don't forget, this is a guy who did knock down Ian Gary back in 2023. Since then, again, a unanimous decision victory over Rolando Bedoya, where he knocked down Bedoya in that fight. The Kevin Joustin fight really makes me not want to pick Song Kenan, but again, I'm still going to. Losses Kevin Joustin, then beat Rick Glenn in his last fight. It wasn't overly impressive, but won the fight by unanimous decision. Yeah, give me the assassin Song Kenan. Don't feel great about the pick, but I wouldn't feel good about picking the 40-year-old Muslim Salikhov. If last weekend taught us anything with Stipe Miocic and Mike Tyson, don't pick the old guys. All right? Give me Song Kenan to win the fight by unanimous decision. As we go on to our next one, by the way, sending the Chinese fighters to 5-1. We go on to our next one here, another Chinese fighter. You have got Ming Zhang taking on Ozzy Diaz. This feels like a bludgeoning. I'm not gonna lie, it does. Personally, I think that they're throwing Ozzy Diaz into the wolves for this fight. They are. This is a fight that Mingyang Zhang should win, and should win pretty quickly. I'm taking Zhang to win the fight by first round knockout. I'll talk about it, but that's the pick. You look at Mingyang Zhang, I believe it's what it is, not Zhang Mingyang. Mingyang Zhang's first win in the UFC 298 in Anaheim, California. Goes out there and knocks out Brendan Hibero in a brutal and a crazy first round. The fight only lasts a minute and 40 seconds, but if you get the time to watch it, it's a good minute and 40 seconds of fighting. And now, Hibero hasn't been the best UFC guy. I think he's had, 3 fights in the UFC now? I think he has. Yeah, he has had 3 fights in the promotion. He won his last one over Kyle Machado by split decision in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. But Mingyang Zhang went out there and just threw caution in the wind and just absolutely just went for it in that fight. And Hibero did too. Again, that's why it's a great fight, But Ming Zhang finds the knockout power and puts down Figueiredo in that first round. Now, after the fight, Ming Zhang goes on the microphone and calls for Alex Pereira at UFC 300 after the fight. I'm not joking. That's what he called out for after the fight. He gets, just slightly a step down from Alex Pereira. He gets Ozzy Diaz, who is 9-2 professionally, who has not fought in the Contender Series recently. He did get a shot in 2022 in the Contender. I actually thought he was going to beat Joe Pyfer. I'm going to be honest with you guys. I thought he was going to beat Pyfer. I wasn't all that, I kind of thought Diaz was pretty decent. He fought in LFA. He was the defending middleweight champion. He lost on the Contender to Joe Pyfer. That was obviously the famous Dana White quote, "Be like Joe Pyfer," because Pyfer was the only one who got a knockout on that card. Since then, Ozzy Diaz has won back-to-back fights. He won in LFA. He's gone up to light heavyweight. He knocked out Chuck Campbell, but Chuck Campbell, I believe, is very old at this point now. Chuck Campbell's been around. And then he beat Bevon Lewis after that. Okay. Bevon Lewis, at one point, a pretty good win. I don't really know what we can say about Bevon Lewis at this point in his career. Let's just be honest with you guys. Just be honest with ourselves, guys. Bevon Lewis is older too. I mean, this is a former UFC name who is now, he's 33, but he's just lost a lot. Bevon Lewis is 7-6 now. Once a fighter who, won in the UFC when he beat Daquan Townsend in 2020, lost to Trevin Giles in his last fight, went to the PFL, lost to Ozzy Diaz in LFA, and then just lost his last fight in Synergy FC, wherever the hell that is, for their light heavyweight championship against Julius Walker. Ozzy Diaz hits hard, but everybody hits hard. Ming Zhang just took on a very heavy hitter in Brendan Figueiredo, and what happened? He knocked him out. Ozzy Diaz is going to take chances. He's a guy who is very capable of getting knocked out. He's going to put himself in harm's way in order to try to get the knockout in his own right. That's what makes this fight difficult for Ozzy Diaz to win. Again, like Kong Wang, this is a fight that the UFC is putting out here because they want the Chinese fighter to win on the main card. It's what it is. Let's just keep it honest with ourselves. And the next fight might be that same way too, even though some people are picking Tabatha Ricci. I don't know. We'll get to that. I'm gonna take Shandong, China's own, and Ming Zhang to beat Ozzy Diaz. He's the way better striker. He's got more power. The Figueiredo fight was really impressive. I think again the UFC has kind of found a really good light heavyweight prospect from China here. I think they're going to take their time, obviously, building Ming Zhang, but there's a reason, again, they put him on the main card of this pay-per-view, or not pay-per-view, but on this fight night card. They want to get eyes on him, and he should be able to win on the main card. Give me Ming Zhang, the Mountain Tiger, to win in the first round. He'll knock out Ozzy Diaz early. Diaz will be making, his UFC debut at 34 years of age, and he's been chinned before by Joe Pyfer. I think Ming Zhang's able to knock him out. Again, everyone hits hard, but it's the same kind of situation that Ming Zhang fought against Brendan Figueiredo. Good striker. I just think Zhang's better and he hits harder. It's going to be Ming Zhang to win the fight by first round knockout. As we go on to our next one, the co-main event of the evening. I don't know why Yang Zhaonao's only a -205 favorite in this one. I don't get it. Guys, I get it. We like Tabatha Ricci. People like Tabatha Ricci. Maybe the UFC should promote her over Mackenzie Dern. Just saying. But why? Why are the odds this close? I get it. Yang Zhaonao's 35 years of age. She's coming off of a title loss in her last fight, fighting for the belt at UFC 300 against Zhang Weili. But Yang Zhaonan looked very impressive in that fight, even in a loss. She almost had Zhang Weili at the end of that fight. I mean, after almost getting submitted in the second round, or should have been out in the second round, Yang Zhaonan again came back and was very competitive in that fight. She won before that against Mackenzie Dern over Jessica Andrade too. She's got power. I don't know. I just don't see a world how Tabatha Ricci beats her. I like Tabatha Ricci. I actually picked Tabatha Ricci a lot. She, her striking game is improving. She kind of just wins back and forth striking fights close against like Angela Hill, Tisha Torres. She'll just barely win these fights because she looks more impressive and because of the control time that Tabatha Ricci does rack up because she is able just to kind of just hold her opponents, push them back up against the fence and just grind out the decision. So that's how, again, Tabatha Ricci will win fights. The problem for Tabatha Ricci in this one is I don't think she's able to do that against a fighter of the caliber of Yang Zhaonan. That's, that's how I see it here. I think Yang Zhaonan does pick up the victory. She's the way better striker. On the ground, sure, Tabatha Ricci might have some skills to beat Yang Zhaonan. Her jiu-jitsu is really good, and Yang Zhaonan has been taken down before. I think the only reason people are picking Yang Zhaonan, I think is because they are picking Tabatha Ricci is because they see the success Zhang Weili had on the ground against Yang Zhaonan, and even Carla Esparza too. But here's the thing. Yang Zhaonan has lost to 2 fighters in the UFC, I think ever, right? She's only got 2 losses, right? 3. Who's the other loss? Oh, Marina Rodriguez. I'm not going to count that. I thought she won that fight. Yang Zhaonan's really only lost to 2 fighters convincingly in the UFC. right? It's Zhang Weili and it's Carla Esparza. Okay, she got finished by Esparza the only time she's ever been finished in her career. But what is the common denominator between Zhang Weili and Carla Esparza? They are potentially the two best wrestlers and just all around like physically strong, fighters in this weight class, other than Tatiana Suarez. Will Tatiana Suarez ever fight? I don't know, but that's kind of what makes that's kind of what I think in this fight, right? So those are only the fighters who have been able to contain Yan Xiaonan and dominate her on the ground. I don't think Tabatha Ricci is able to do that. Yeah, she's got good jiu-jitsu, but Tabatha Ricci does struggle to get takedowns sometimes against good fighters. Tisha Torres fights evident of that. The Lupi Godinez fight as well. She got stuck in a striking fight with Godinez because, again, Tabatha Ricci wasn't strong enough and wasn't physical enough to be able to get that fight on the ground. So that's how Lupi Godinez was able to keep it standing, and Lupi Godinez just outstruck her. Again, I get it. We like Ricci. She's on a pretty sizable win streak. Well, other than, she's won, 6 out of 7 here? 5 out of 6? Actually, no, 6-7. That's great. But don't just dismiss the Lupi Godinez loss. And then again, Angela Hill, she barely got by Tisha Torres. She probably didn't win the Torres fight, even though we picked Tabatha Ricci to win. I think Yan Xiaonan absolutely dominates. I get it, she's 35 years old, but this is her last push to the title, it seems like, and I think this is where the push starts. She's in China, she's at home. This will send the Chinese fighters to 7-1 on this card. I just think Yan Xiaonan dominates the fight. She wins it by, again, impressive unanimous decision victory here. I just don't think Tabatha Ricci's on her level. I don't think Tabatha Ricci's going to be able to fight her fight in this one. She's not going to be able to implement her game plan against Yan Xiaonan because of the way Yan Xiaonan fights, her quick striking, and I just don't think Tabatha Ricci's able to close distance and just tie up and grapple. Also, again, Yan Xiaonan's the bigger fighter. She's 5'5". Ricci is 5'1". Again, that's comparative to like Tisha Torres, who's a very small fighter, a very short fighter, Lupi Godinez, Angela Hill, Jillian Robertson. It's not like that, though, against Yan Xiaonan. Yan Xiaonan should dominate the fight. I don't see any world where Yan Xiaonan does not go out there and beat Tabatha Ricci. Just gonna be honest with you guys. Let's go on to our main event. We've got Deiveson Figueiredo, Deuce de Guerra, getting the fight against Petr Yan in the main event. Again, 5 rounds in the bantamweight division. It's a great fight. It really is. It's a great fight in the main event. Deiveson Figueiredo coming off a huge victory over Marlon Vera. This fight should determine who is fighting for the belt next. Not Umar Nurmagomedov. Not Sean O'Malley. You know what they should do? They're not going to do it. Because it's either Sean's getting the rematch or Umar's getting the title fight. What they should do, Umar and Sean should fight, and the winner of Yan and Figueiredo should be fighting Merab next. That's what should happen. Will they do it? No. And I get it. Okay, hear me out. Okay. I'll give you this. If Yan wins, okay. If Yan wins, we'll give the fight to Umar. We'll do Umar and Merab, and then Yan gets his rematch against Sean O'Malley. If Deiveson Figueiredo wins, Deiveson Figueiredo deserves a title fight. Then you do Figgy versus Merab. Good luck, O'Malley. Go fight Umar. Umar's only beat one ranked guy. I get it, it's Corey Sandhagen. But one ranked win shouldn't deserve a title fight. But now he's much more deserving of a title fight than Sean O'Malley is. If Sean O'Malley gets a rematch against, if Sean O'Malley gets a rematch against Merab and Aljamain Sterling didn't get a rematch after breaking the record for most consecutive title defenses at 135 pounds and has to go up to featherweight and beat Mos Vaevolayev and Calvin Kattar to get a title shot, I swear, if Sean O'Malley gets a rematch after losing 49-46 to Merab, it doesn't make sense. It's not like it's 2017 where, we just don't have any more title challengers. All right, Garbrandt, go get your rematch against Dillashaw, which, by the way, killed Garbrandt's career that he went into a second fight right away against Dillashaw. No, we've got title challengers. It's not like, Dominic Cruz is hurt. We can't really warrant giving a Sunset a title fight because Dillashaw's already beat him twice. Like, no. I think, did he beat Sunset twice? Once. I don't remember. Marlon Moraes isn't proven yet, coming over from World Series. Like, it made sense at the time. Okay, give Garbrandt another title fight. It would make no sense to give O'Malley a rematch. Absolutely no sense. Regardless, there's my little rant about that fight. The winner of this fight should be fighting for a belt if it's Deiveson Figueiredo. If not, Yan should be fighting Sean O'Malley in his rematch. And I think, again, I'd like Petr Yan in a rematch against Sean O'Malley. This is an interesting fight. It is. Because Deuce de Guerra it seems like he's not aging. He's about to turn 37 years of age. Of course, again, the former flyweight champion heading up to 135 pounds. He's undefeated at 135. You could argue that he maybe should be fighting for a belt already. He's won 3 times. He's a former champion at 125 pounds, had only lost in his entire career to Brandon Moreno in that one fight against UCA Formiga. But wins over Rob Font, Cody Garbrandt, and Marlon Chito Vera, that's impressive. Chito Vera got a title fight after beating Pedro Munoz. Petr Yan, he did go in the 3-fight losing skid, obviously, right? Losing to Aljo, lost to O'Malley, lost to Merab. He got dominated in the Merab fight. I thought he lost the Aljo fight. I thought he beat Sean O'Malley and then looked really good in the Song Yadong fight. I'll give him all the credit in the world. I didn't know if Petr Yan had that, impressive performance again. I didn't know if he had that, prime Yan performance anymore. No, he does. Yan's still legit. So again, that's why I was questionable in the Petr Yan and Song Yadong fight. I took Song Yadong, but now, no, okay, I am willing to say, no, Petr Yan is still there. That guy is still there. He just, he got melted in the Merab fight, but that's Merab. Lost to Aljo. Well, again, Aljo's the go of the weight class, and then he got robbed in the O'Malley fight. But now, again, we do know how good O'Malley is, right? Like, I'm hating a little bit on O'Malley here, but I just don't think he deserves the next title fight. So, again, I think Yan's still back. Yan's back. He's 31 years of age. This is the guy that he, was when he won the championship. For Figueiredo, again, 3 straight victories, looking great right now. Really good striker. He first guy to ever knock down Chito Vera, which is insane. Shows you the power Deuce to get at his have. The problem for Deiveson is, though, I think matchup-wise, Petr Yan is going to get him. I do think so. I think Petr Yan is going to get Deiveson Figueiredo in this fight. I think eventually he breaks him, I'm going to be honest. And I think Petr Yan wins the fight by 4th round TKO. I think eventually, again, it's a 5-round fight. Deiveson Figueiredo, he's looked great in 3-round fights. He hasn't gone the full 5 since the fight where he beat Brandon Moreno, in a fight where, yes, he did knock down Brandon Moreno 3 times, but Moreno was, still pushing forward, and Moreno was still, outstriking him. I thought Figueiredo won. I picked Figueiredo to win the fight. I felt good about it, but that's the last time he's been 5 rounds. And I get it, the cardio is not that much of an issue anymore because, again, he's not killing himself to make 125 pounds. Like, the cardio definitely was destroying him and was absolutely taking a toll on him in that, the 4th fight against Moreno in 2023 in Brazil, the one that Moreno wins by doctor stoppage. But Yan is just a cardio machine, man. He is. I think, again, that doesn't get stated enough because, he fought Aljo and he fought, Merab, 2 great guys. But don't forget, Yan was winning the 4th and 5th rounds of that fight against Aljo. Again, Merab completely melted him and, Yan didn't win a round in that fight. But Yan's going to be there at the end of the 25 minutes. I don't know if Figueiredo is, and I think Yan should be able to just kind of break Figgy as the fight moved on in this one. I do think the body work that Jan's able to put on is going to be nasty in this fight. I just think he's a better striker than Figueiredo. I think Figueiredo's great too, don't get me wrong. I think Figueiredo, though, is just going to look for that big power shot a little too much in this fight. I think that's where Jan's able to catch him. I think there are going to be opportunities for Yan to win this fight. Again, Figueiredo is a great striker, but he does throw a lot into his punches, and Yan, again, I don't think is going to, again, get over, zealous with his power. I just think he's just going to try to keep touching up Figueiredo. I think he's going to score points, and I think with that, again, I think Yan eventually, it'll just be an accumulation of damage before, again, Petr Yan ends up winning the fight. So we're going to go with Petr Yan to beat Deiveson Figueiredo. I think he does get it done in the 4th round. I think it's going to be a 4th round TKO victory over Figgy. Again, we've seen Figueiredo broken before in fights. Yes, they were against Brandon Moreno and Brandon Moreno only. Because don't forget the 2nd fight against Moreno, right? The one that Moreno initially won the belt with. Yes, Moreno gets the submission in that one, but that was a result of Moreno knocking down Figueiredo, then taking the back and jumping on the rear naked choke. And yes, Figueiredo looked much improved in the 2nd fight in Anaheim the year after. And I get it, again, Figgy's looked good at 135 pounds so far, but it is Rob Font, Cody Garbrandt, and Marlon Vera. Great guys, and Garbrandt was competitive with Figueiredo on the feet before Figgy got the takedown in the 2nd. Great opponents. But now you get Petr Yan, who's a true top 4 guy in the weight class. Don't get me wrong, Figueiredo's probably number 5. And I think if Figgy wins this fight, I'm going to be all in on a Figueiredo title shot. I think he deserves a title shot if he wins this one. I just think Petr Yan's better. I just think he is. I think his kickboxing, I think his boxing is better. He's got heavier hands. And I think, again, just technically sound-wise, too, I just think Petr Yan's the better guy. It's going to be Petr Yan to win in the main event. We like him to beat Deiveson Figueiredo by 4th round TKO. And I think from here again, you go Petr Yan versus Sean O'Malley, the rematch. And I guess, we have no other option, Umar Nurmagomedov versus Merab Dvalishvili. Just whatever you do, don't give the title shot to Sean O'Malley. He does not deserve it. Make him win a fight. Then he gets a title shot again if he can win a fight. Right now, hell no. But give me Yan in the main event. And folks, that'll do it for our UFC Macau China predictions here on the channel. Make sure to hit that subscribe button down below for more. Make sure to like if you did enjoy the video. We'll be back in 2 weeks for the next UFC card, which happens to be another pay-per-view. UFC 310 is the UFC debut of Kai Asakura. He'll be challenging for the flyweight championship against Alexandre Pantoja. Also in the card again, Ian Gary takes our Shavkat Rakhmonov in a number 1 contenders fight. You've also got Cito Gun, Alexander Volkov, and Aljamain Sterling versus Movsar Evloev as well. And go make sure to check out our PFL predictions next week as well. It's the PFL Championships card. Big fights on that one. Brendan Loughnane, Timur Hizraev, and Impa Kasanganay takes on Dulejan Yegashida as well. So folks, make sure to check that video out next week. We'll be back for the UFC in 2 weeks. Folks, thank you all for watching. Make sure to subscribe button down below for more. Make sure you like if you did enjoy the video. Folks, thank you all for watching. And Mamba forever.